I'm feeling my oats. Field tracker, soybean field, last episode before harvest. So this field looks quite a bit different than it did the last time we were out here. It's September 20th today, and I know I was filming the last video the day before I left for Iowa, so that should have been August 29th. So it's been 3 weeks, and if you remember, if you go back to the last video, I said I had gone ahead and pulled the trigger on having the airplane fly cover crop on. Well, that happened that Monday, so August 31st is when that happened. So there is some cover crop out here. We're going to see that. You can see the beans have lost a lot of their leaves. They've still got some at the bottom. So there's still some green out here. The stems are rather green in places, but I can see some oats and radishes growing out here and that we are getting close to harvest. We have some other beans that are definitely going to be ready first. Remember, this was the first field we planted. The other fields we planted, those are an earlier maturity bean, so they went through the senescence process faster. They're ready to cut. We're probably going to start tomorrow, either that way on a 2.9 bean or that way on a 2.7 bean. These are like a mid-group 3 bean here, so they have not progressed quite as far, but they are close. By the end of next week, they're probably going to be really close. As I walked over here to the middle of the field off the end row from my truck, I see we're going to have probably a little bit of lodging here. We talked about dropping populations to try to prevent that in the last video. But this end row, even though it's got some tile in it, it still lays a little wet. So it kind of doesn't surprise me. We're going to have some rank beans here. Maybe they're not maybe going to lay completely flat since they're not there already. They should maybe even stand back up a little, but see, this area is a little bit greener. This is a little lower, wetter spot. So we may have some of that. And you can see we still definitely have some green out here. Even this spot is lodging slightly. But if we move over, yeah, there's still green out here. They're pretty good pods on these beans. They're not like a ton of pods, so I don't know if this field's going to make crazy yield, but I think we have some other fields that are going to be fantastic, hopefully. So it's going to be interesting to see what we yield in this first field we've planted. We've gone to planting beans first when we can, as weather allows. We did that in 2018. Couldn't do that in 2019 because they all got planted in June because it was so wet. But beans got planted first again this year, and as I said, this was the very first field we planted. So let's take kind of a look below the canopy, because when we first saw this field back in the planting video, remember we planted green, so this field was green. Beans came up, green again. Beans are now maturing and dying off. Field is turning brown, but it's about to turn green again. So this is no-till, so you can still see, last year's corn I plant between the previous year's rows. So this year's beans are split between last year's corn rows. So those are still standing. When we harvest beans, those will get knocked over and they won't be any big deal. They're pretty brittle. They'll just kind of, shatter and fall over. Now, let's look and see what we can find for cover crop. It's not as prevalent as it is in some other fields where we've got covers. Let's see. There's some oats here. Let's move these beans aside. Right here, there's an oat coming up, and we have just got sunny days ahead, so this stuff should be growing well, getting more sunlight. The more leaves are shed by the beans. Let's see if we can't find a tillage radish out here. And oh, all right, there's one right there. So next row over, let's go down here. This guy here is a tillage radish. Looks like it just found a crack in the soil to send its taproot down into. So at the beginning, they're easy to spot because you get these heart-shaped leaves, and then they go into this type of leaf after that. And here is another radish right there. Is a radish, and there's another oat kind of stretching out right there. Look, see, I'm feeling my oats. I'm feeling my oat. As this field turns brown, but it's going to let more and more sunlight down in the canopy, and those oats and radishes are going to take off. And I know from experience, you wouldn't think a totally mature bean would really do any shading, but we had a field with 2 varieties we had to hit a week apart just because of how mature they were one time, and we had oats and radishes out there, and it was actually pretty shocking because you don't think these plants, it's just stalks and pods, wouldn't give much shade, but the half of the field we took off and came back a week later for the other half, that cover crop was twice as big. There's a lot of growth. So once the combine comes through here, the stuff's really going to explode. You might remember those weeds we talked about in the last video. We did kill them, just around the outside. So I'm just feeling this shatter cane since we sprayed it. Doesn't feel like there's too many viable seeds in there. So that would be nice, especially if this field ends up being popcorn next year. Keep the shatter cane out. So yeah, hopefully it's a good decision to spray this. Didn't run over too many beans, it doesn't look like, so no biggie. Ugly weeds still here, but they're dead, so they're not so ugly. Here's a good little patch of oats. There's some sprouting up there. There's kind of a 4 or 5 of them over there. So those are going to be good. So, and I kind of joke, when we plant cover crops, one of the ways I talk about them is I'm planting a weed that I know how I'm going to kill. So, you know, I'm kind of selecting my weeds. If these grow really good, they're going to outcompete some other weeds out here. But one advantage, disadvantage, how you look at it, of this oats and radish mix is these will not survive the winter. When we get a few nights below freezing, these are done for. So we want into September, really all through October, we would like to be pretty warm and definitely not freezing, below freezing at night. If we can get these to grow for a long time, we get really good weed suppression before winter sets in. So I think that's really going to be it for now from this soybean field for this episode. Next episode, combine's going to be rolling out here. We're going to get some yield numbers, see how things really did, check out how much farther that cover crop has come along. And maybe since we got a cover crop in this one, we'll do a follow-up a few weeks after harvest and see how much that cover crop has grown, so you can take a look at some bigger cover crops when hopefully this field is once again a carpet of green.